Amara Carter was not the kind of person who liked to be late. She prided herself on punctuality, always planning ahead and leaving room for unexpected delays. But today, everything seemed to go wrong. Her alarm didn't ring because her phone had died overnight. She spilled coffee on her favorite blouse while rushing to get ready, and traffic was at a standstill due to an accident on the highway. By the time she reached the airport, beads of sweat were forming on her forehead as panic began to creep in. Her flight to New York wasn't just any trip, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. For months, Amara had been preparing for this moment. The job interview waiting for her on the other side of the country could change everything: better pay, more responsibility, and a chance to finally prove herself in her field. It felt like all her hard work, late nights, and sacrifices were leading up to this day, and now she was cutting it dangerously close. As she sprinted through the bustling terminal, dodging slow-moving families and dragging her suitcase behind her, Amara checked the departure board with growing dread. Gate 23 blinked back at her, showing final boarding call. Her heart sank, but she refused to give up. Pushing through the crowd, she made it to the gate just as the line was thinning out. Passengers were handing over their boarding passes, some glancing impatiently at their watches. But then, something caught her eye. A man struggling near the entrance to the jet bridge. He was seated in a wheelchair, trying to maneuver himself and his carry-on bag through the narrow space. His face was calm, but there was frustration in his eyes as he attempted to adjust his position without knocking over his belongings. Around him, people streamed past, either too busy or too indifferent to notice his predicament. Amara hesitated for only a second before making her decision. She couldn't leave him there, not when she saw how much effort he was putting into solving the problem alone. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward and gently tapped him on the shoulder. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Can I help you with that?" The man looked up, surprised but grateful. "Oh, thank you," he replied, his voice warm and reassuring. "I think my bag is stuck and I can't quite reach it from here." Without another thought, Amara crouched down beside him, carefully untangling the strap of his bag from the armrest of the wheelchair. As she worked, she noticed the way he held himself. There was a quiet strength about him, even though his situation clearly frustrated him. Once the bag was free, she helped him secure it properly and stood back, smiling. "There you go," she said. "All set." He gave her a genuine smile, his dark eyes lighting up with gratitude. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "Thank you so much. Most people wouldn't stop." Amara shrugged, feeling a little self-conscious. "It's no big deal. We've all been in situations where we needed a hand." Just as she turned to head toward the boarding gate, a sinking feeling hit her. The line was gone. The gate agent was closing the door and the plane was already pulling away from the terminal. Her stomach dropped as reality set in. She had missed her flight. All those months of preparation, all that hope and anticipation, had slipped away in the span of a few minutes. For a moment, Amara stood frozen, staring at the empty gate. Then she glanced back at the man in the wheelchair who was watching her with concern. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Did you miss your flight because of me?" She shook her head quickly, forcing a small smile. "No, it's fine. Really. I'm glad I could help." But inside her mind was racing. What was she going to do now? The interview was tomorrow morning, and every alternative option felt overwhelming. Would they even consider rescheduling after she failed to show up? How would she explain this to her family, who had cheered her on every step of the way? Then why? Man must have sensed her distress because he spoke again, his tone gentle. "Listen, if there's anything I can do to make this right, please let me know. You didn't deserve to miss your flight because of me." Amara appreciated his kindness but shook her head. "It's not your fault," she said firmly. "These things happen. I'll figure it out." Still, as she walked away from Gate 23, dragging her suitcase behind her, she couldn't shake the weight of what had just happened. Missing her flight was bad enough, but the irony wasn't lost on her, that she had chosen to help someone else at the cost of her own dreams. Deep Down, though, she knew she wouldn't have done anything differently. Helping others came naturally to her, almost instinctively. Even if it meant facing disappointment, she believed it was the right thing to do. Little did Amara realize, however, that this act of kindness would ripple outward in ways she could never have imagined. As she disappeared into the crowded terminal, searching for answers and trying to piece together Plan B, the man in the wheelchair watched her go, his expression thoughtful. There was something about her warmth, her sincerity, that lingered in his mind long after she was out of sight. And somewhere in the back of her own mind, Amara couldn't help but wonder if fate had other plans for her. After all, life had a funny way of surprising people when they least expected it. After the whirlwind of emotions at Gate 23, Amara found herself sitting alone in a quiet corner of the terminal, trying to process what had just happened. Her flight was gone, her carefully laid plans were crumbling, and she felt like she was stuck in some kind of strange limbo. She glanced at the departure board again, hoping against hope that there might be another flight leaving soon for New York. But as she scanned the screen, her heart sank further. The next available flight wasn't until the following morning, which meant she'd miss her interview entirely unless she could pull off a miracle. Feeling defeated, Amara decided to take a break and clear her head. She hadn't eaten anything since breakfast, and the stress was starting to make her feel lightheaded. Dragging her suitcase behind her, she wandered toward one of the airport cafes, where the smell of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give her a small sense of comfort. She ordered a large cappuccino and found a seat by the window, watching planes taxi down the runway as she sipped her drink. But just as she began to relax, something, or rather someone, caught her attention. Across the cafe, seated at a small table near the corner, was the man from earlier, the same man whose wheelchair had gotten stuck at the gate. He was hunched over his laptop, typing furiously, his brow furrowed in concentration. Amara hesitated, for a moment, unsure whether to approach him or not. After all, she barely knew him, and their interaction had been brief. Still, there was something about him that intrigued her. A quiet confidence, maybe, or the way he carried himself despite the challenges he faced. Taking a deep breath, Amara gathered her courage and walked over to his table. "Hey," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. "Mind if I join you?" The man looked up, surprised but pleased to see her. "Of course," he replied with a warm smile. "Please have a seat." Amara slid into the chair opposite him, feeling a little awkward but also strangely at ease. "I just wanted to check if everything worked out okay with your flight," she explained. "You seemed like you were in a hurry earlier." He nodded, closing his laptop slightly so he could focus on their conversation. "Yes, thank you. Everything's fine now. I appreciate your help back there. It made a big difference." They fell into an easy rhythm of talking, exchanging stories about their lives and why they were at the airport. Amara learned that his name was Elijah Grant and he traveled frequently for work. He didn't elaborate too much on what he did, but he mentioned that his job involved a lot of meetings and presentations. What stood out most, though, was how passionate he was about accessibility. He spoke animatedly about the importance of making spaces, especially public ones like airports, more inclusive for people with disabilities. "I've lost count of how many times I've run into issues like the one today," Elijah admitted, his tone tinged with frustration but also determination. "It's frustrating, sure, but it's also what drives me to keep pushing for change. Everyone deserves to travel with dignity." Amara listened intently, nodding along as he spoke. His words resonated with her deeply. Growing up, she had always believed in standing up for others and doing what was right, even when it was inconvenient. Hearing Elijah talk about his experiences reminded her of those values and gave her a renewed sense of purpose. Maybe, she thought, missing her flight wasn't such a waste after all. If nothing else, it had brought her here, to this moment, where she was having a meaningful conversation with someone who truly inspired her. As they talked, Amara opened up about her own situation, the job interview she had missed, the pressure She felt to succeed in the fear that she might have blown her chance forever. To her surprise, Elijah didn't offer empty platitudes or dismissive reassurances. Instead, he listened patiently, asking thoughtful questions and sharing anecdotes from his own life that mirrored her struggles. "You know," he said after a pause, "sometimes things don't go according to plan, but that doesn't mean they're ruined. Life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. Who knows? Maybe this delay will lead to something even better than you imagined." His words struck a chord with Amara. She couldn't deny that part of her still clung to the idea of failure, that she had let everyone down by missing her flight. But Elijah's optimism was contagious. For the first time since arriving at the airport, she allowed herself to entertain the possibility that maybe, just maybe, things would work out in the end. Eventually, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, and they laughed together about the quirks of air travel, the endless security checks, the cramped seats, and the questionable quality of airplane food. By the time they parted ways, Amara felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. Before leaving, Elijah handed her his business card, scribbling a quick note on the back. "If you ever need anything or just want to chat further, don't hesitate to reach out," he said with a smile. "It was really nice meeting you, Amara." She thanked him and promised to stay in touch, tucking the card into her pocket as she walked away. Back at her hotel later that evening, Amara pulled out the card again, examining it under the dim light of her bedside lamp. It was sleek and professional, with Elijah's name printed neatly in bold letters. Only then did she notice the logo. In the corner, a stylized airplane with the words Skyward Airlines beneath it. Something about the name sounded familiar, but she couldn't quite place it. Exhausted from the day's events, Amara set the card aside and climbed into bed, her mind replaying the conversation with Elijah. Despite everything that had gone wrong, she couldn't help but feel grateful for the unexpected detour that had led her to him. There was something special about him, something she couldn't quite put into words. But whatever it was, it left her feeling hopeful in a way she hadn't expected. As sleep began to overtake her, Amara made a mental note to look up Skyward Airlines the next day. Something told her that this encounter was only the beginning of a much bigger story. The next morning, Amara woke up early, her mind still buzzing with thoughts of the previous day. She had tossed and turned most of the night, replaying her conversation with Elijah over and over again. Something about him lingered in her thoughts. His calm demeanor, his passion for accessibility, and the way he seemed to genuinely care about others. But what stuck out most was the business card she'd tucked into her wallet before falling asleep. Skyward Airlines. The name sounded familiar, but she couldn't quite place it. Determined to shake off her grogginess, Amara got ready quickly and headed back to the airport. Her rescheduled flight wasn't until late afternoon, so she decided to spend some time exploring the terminal while keeping an eye on the departure board. As she wandered through the bustling concourse, sipping on a fresh cup of coffee, something caught her attention, a massive billboard towering above the crowd. It featured a striking image of a man seated confidently in a wheelchair, gazing directly at the camera with a warm smile. Beneath the photo were bold letters that read, "Skyward Airlines, redefining travel for everyone." Amara froze in her tracks, nearly spilling her coffee. The man in the picture was unmistakably Elijah. Her heart skipped a beat as realization dawned on her. Skyward Airlines wasn't just another airline. It was his company. Elijah wasn't just a frequent traveler. He was the founder and CEO of one of the fastest-growing airlines in the industry. How could she have missed that? All those passionate words he'd spoken about accessibility suddenly made perfect sense. He wasn't just talking about ideals. He was living them, building a business around making air travel more inclusive for everyone. Her mind raced as she stared at the billboard. What were the odds that she had helped the owner of an entire airline without even realizing it? And what did this mean for their brief connection? Was he going to think she was just trying to get special treatment now? Or worse, would he assume she only cared because of his status? Shaking her head, Amara reminded herself not to jump to conclusions. Elijah hadn't struck her as someone who judged people based on appearances or intentions. Still, curiosity got the better of her. Back at her gate, she pulled out her phone and typed Elijah Grant Skyward Airlines into the search bar. Within seconds, dozens of articles popped up, detailing his journey from a young entrepreneur with big dreams to the visionary leader behind a revolutionary airline. She learned that Elijah had founded Skyward Airlines after years of frustration with inaccessible travel options. Born with a condition that limited his mobility, he had faced countless obstacles while flying, everything from broken elevators to dismissive staff. Instead of letting these challenges defeat him, he channeled his energy into creating a solution. His airline prioritized inclusivity, offering features like spacious seating for passengers with disabilities, trained staff to assist travelers with special needs, and partnerships with advocacy groups to ensure no one felt left behind. Reading. Through the articles, Amara felt a renewed sense of admiration for Elijah. He wasn't just a successful businessman. He was a trailblazer, someone who used his platform to create real change. The more she read, the more she understood why he had resonated with her so deeply. Their values aligned in ways she hadn't fully grasped during their initial meeting. By the time her flight boarded, Amara's mind was spinning with possibilities. Should she reach out to Elijah? Would he even remember her? After all, he met hundreds of people in his line of work. But then she remembered the genuine warmth in his voice when they spoke, and the way he had encouraged her to stay in touch. Maybe reaching out wouldn't be such a bad idea. Later that evening, after landing in New York, Amara sat down in her hotel room and opened her laptop. She stared at the blank email draft for several minutes, unsure of how to begin. Finally, she took a deep breath and started typing. Subject: Thank you again. Dear Elijah, I hope this email finds you well. I wanted to thank you once again for your kindness yesterday and for the inspiring conversation we had at the cafe. I've thought about our discussion quite a bit since then, especially your perspective on accessibility and inclusion. It's rare to meet someone so committed to making the world a better place, and I truly admire your dedication. Speaking of which, imagine my surprise when I saw your face on a billboard at the airport today. I had no idea you were the founder of Skyward Airlines. Learning about your work has been incredibly enlightening, and I can see firsthand how much thought and care goes into every aspect of the airline. You're doing amazing things, and I'm honored to have crossed paths with you. If you'd like to continue our conversation, or if there's ever anything I can do to support your mission, please don't hesitate to let me know. Wishing you all the best moving forward. Warm regards, Amara. After rereading the email twice to make sure it sounded sincere yet professional, Amara hit send. Almost immediately, she regretted it. Had she come across as too eager, too formal? What if Elijah thought she was fishing for favors? She spent the next hour obsessively refreshing her inbox, hoping for a response but simultaneously dreading one. To her amazement, Elijah replied within minutes. Subject: Thank you again, dear Amara. Thank you for taking the time to write. Your email brought a smile to my face. I'm glad you enjoyed our conversation as much as I did, and please don't feel intimidated by the billboard. I'm still the same person you met at the airport. I'm touched that you took the time to learn more about Skyward Airlines. Accessibility is a cause close to my heart, and it means a lot to hear that our efforts resonate with someone like you. Speaking of which, I'd love to invite you to dinner when you're back in town. There's so much more I'd like to discuss, both personally and professionally. Let me know what you think. Looking forward to hearing from you soon. Best regards, Elijah Amara. Read the email 3 times, her heart pounding with excitement. Dinner? With Elijah Grant? The invitation felt surreal, almost too good to be true. Yet, as she reread his words, she realized how genuine they were. This wasn't just a polite gesture. It was an opportunity to deepen their connection and perhaps even explore ways to collaborate. Without hesitation, she replied, accepting the invitation and expressing her gratitude. As she closed her laptop, a wave of anticipation washed over her. For the first time since missing her flight, Amara felt a spark of optimism. Little did she know, this unexpected encounter was about to take her life in a direction she never could have predicted. When Amara returned home after her trip to New York, she couldn't stop thinking about Elijah's invitation. Dinner with him wasn't just a casual meetup. It felt like the beginning of something significant, though she wasn't quite sure what that something was yet. Her mind raced with possibilities as she unpacked her suitcase and tried to settle back into her routine. Would this be purely professional, or was there more to it? She didn't want to get ahead of herself, but the warmth in Elijah's messages made her believe he saw her as more than just an acquaintance. The days leading up to their dinner were filled with anticipation. Amara found herself second-guessing everything: what to wear, how formal to act, whether she should bring up her missed interview or steer clear of awkward topics altogether. She scrolled through her wardrobe multiple times before finally settling on a simple yet elegant dress. It was understated but confident, much like her approach to life. On the evening of their meeting, she took extra care with her appearance, wanting to strike the perfect balance between professionalism and authenticity. Elijah had chosen a cozy rooftop restaurant overlooking the city skyline for their dinner. As Amara arrived, she spotted him waiting near the entrance, dressed in a tailored suit that somehow managed to look effortless. He greeted her with a warm smile and extended his hand, which she shook firmly. There was an ease between them, as if they'd known each other for years rather than just a few days. They were seated at a quiet corner table, surrounded by twinkling fairy lights and the distant hum of the city below. The atmosphere was intimate without being overwhelming, allowing them to focus entirely on their conversation. As they perused the menu, Elijah asked about her experience in New York. Amara hesitated for a moment before admitting that she hadn't been able to reschedule her interview. "I'm sorry to hear that," Elijah said sincerely, "but I have. No doubt you'll find another opportunity soon. You're incredibly talented, Amara. Anyone would be lucky to have you on their team." His words caught her off guard. No one had ever spoken to her with such genuine admiration before, and it left her feeling both flattered and slightly vulnerable. She changed the subject, steering the conversation toward Skyward Airlines. "So tell me more about your company," she said, leaning forward with curiosity. "How do you manage to make such big changes in an industry that seems so resistant to them?" Elijah chuckled softly, clearly pleased by her interest. "It's not easy," he admitted. "There are always challenges, people who don't understand why accessibility matters, investors who prioritize profits over principles, and even internal resistance within the company. But I've learned that change starts with vision. If you can inspire others to see the value in what you're doing, they'll follow you." He went on to share stories about some of the hurdles he'd faced while building Skyward Airlines. From securing funding to convincing skeptics that inclusivity could be profitable, every step had required determination and resilience. Yet, despite the obstacles, Elijah spoke with unwavering optimism. His passion was infectious, and Amara found herself hanging onto every word. As the evening wore on, their conversation shifted from work to personal topics. Elijah opened up about his childhood, growing up in a small town where resources were limited and opportunities scarce. His disability had often made him feel like an outsider, but instead of letting it define him, he used it as motivation to prove himself. "I wanted to show people that limitations are only as real as we allow them to be," he explained. "If you believe in yourself, nothing can hold you back." Amara listened intently, moved by his story. In turn, she shared bits of her own journey, the struggles of balancing ambition with self-doubt, the pressure to succeed, and the constant fear of failure. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly understood. Elijah didn't offer empty platitudes or dismissive reassurances. Instead, he validated her feelings and encouraged her to keep pushing forward. By the end of the meal, the connection between them had deepened significantly. They laughed together, exchanged ideas, and discovered shared interests they hadn't realized before. As dessert plates were cleared away, Elijah leaned back in his chair, studying her thoughtfully. "You know," he began, breaking the comfortable silence, "I've been thinking about something." Amara raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh? What's that?" "I think you'd be a great asset to Skyward Airlines," he said simply. Your empathy, your drive, your ability to connect with people, all of those qualities align perfectly with our mission. I'd love for you to consider joining us. Her eyes widened in surprise. Joining your team? She repeated, unsure if she'd heard him correctly. Yes, Elijah confirmed with a nod. We're looking for someone to lead initiatives focused on customer experience and community engagement. Someone who understands the human side of travel. And honestly, Amara, I can't think of anyone better suited for the role. For a moment, Amara was speechless. The idea of working for Elijah, at a company she now deeply admired, was thrilling, but also daunting. Could she really step into such a high-profile position? Would she live up to his expectations? Sensing her hesitation, Elijah smiled reassuringly. Don't feel like you need to decide right away, he said gently. Take some time to think about it. But I hope you'll at least consider it. You have a lot to offer, and I think we could achieve incredible things together. As they left the restaurant and walked along the rooftop terrace, Amara found herself smiling despite her nerves. This night had been far more than she'd anticipated, a blend of inspiration, admiration, and possibility. Elijah wasn't just offering her a job, he was inviting her to join a movement, to help shape a future where everyone felt seen and valued. Before parting ways, Elijah turned to her, his expression softening. Thank you for saying yes to dinner tonight, he said quietly. And thank you for being exactly who you are. It's rare to meet someone who makes such a lasting impression. Amara felt her cheeks flush, but she held his gaze steadily. The feeling is mutual, she replied, meaning every word. As she watched him leave, she realized that this wasn't just the start of a professional partnership, it was the beginning of something deeper, something neither of them could fully define yet. Whatever lay ahead, Amara knew one thing for certain. Her life was about to change in ways she never imagined. Amara's decision to join Skyward Airlines marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life. A chapter filled with growth, challenges, and unexpected joys. She threw herself into her role with enthusiasm, working closely with Elijah to develop initiatives that would enhance accessibility and improve customer experiences across the airline. Her natural empathy and problem-solving skills quickly became invaluable assets to the team. Together, they brainstormed innovative ideas, from designing more comfortable seating for passengers with disabilities to launching training programs for staff on how to provide compassionate service. But it wasn't just their professional partnership that flourished. Over time, Amara and Elijah grew closer as friends, sharing not only work-related conversations, but also personal stories, dreams, and fears. Their bond deepened with each passing day, built on mutual respect, trust, and admiration. Elijah admired Amara's authenticity and determination, while Amara found inspiration in Elijah's resilience and vision. They complemented each other perfectly, balancing strengths and weaknesses in a way that felt almost effortless. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Elijah invited Amara to join him for dinner at his favorite rooftop restaurant, the same place where they had first discussed her joining Skyward Airlines. The city lights twinkled below them, casting a warm glow over the table as they reminisced about how far they'd come since that night. "You've changed everything around here," Elijah said, raising his glass in a toast. "I don't think people realize how much of an impact you've made." Amara smiled, touched by his words. "I couldn't have done any of it without your support," she replied honestly. "You believed in me when I wasn't sure I believed in myself." Their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a connection that went beyond friendship or professional collaboration. It was something deeper, something neither of them could ignore anymore. As the weeks turned into months, their relationship continued to evolve. They spent more time together outside of work, exploring the city, attending events, and simply enjoying each other's company. Amara loved how effortlessly Elijah integrated into her world, meeting her family, cheering her on during tough days, and always finding ways to make her laugh. In return, she brought lightness and joy into his life, reminding him to slow down and appreciate the little moments. One crisp autumn weekend, Elijah surprised Amara with tickets to Paris. "Consider it a thank you," he said with a grin as he handed her the envelope. "For all your hard work and for putting up with me." Amara laughed, thrilled by the idea of a spontaneous getaway. "You didn't have to do this," she said, though her excitement was evident. "But I'm definitely not complaining." The trip was magical, filled with strolls along the Seine, visits to iconic landmarks, and quiet moments sipping coffee at charming sidewalk cafes. On their final evening in the City of Lights, Elijah suggested taking a walk along the river. As they wandered beneath the golden glow of streetlights, Amara felt a sense of peace wash over her. This was where she belonged, with Elijah, sharing adventures and building memories together. Then, as they paused near a bridge overlooking the water, Elijah stopped suddenly. Turning to face her, he took both of her hands in his expression serious yet tender. "Amara," he began, his voice steady but laced with emotion, "there's something I need to say." Her heart skipped a beat as she looked at him, sensing the gravity of the moment. "What is it?" she asked softly. Elijah took a deep breath, then dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a delicate diamond ring, its brilliance catching the light. "Amara Carter," he said, his dark eyes shining with love. "You've brought so much meaning and joy into my life. You remind me every day of the power of kindness, courage, and connection. Will you marry me?" Tears welled up in Amara's eyes as she stared at him, overwhelmed by emotion. Everything, the missed flight, the chance encounter at the airport, the countless conversations and shared dreams, had led her to this moment. And now, standing before her, was the man who had become her partner, her confidant, and her greatest supporter. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with happiness. "Of course, yes." Elijah slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood up to embrace her tightly. Around them, strangers passing by broke into applause, adding to the magic of the moment. As they held each other, Amara realized that this was more than just a proposal. It was a celebration of everything they had built together and a promise of what was yet to come. When they returned home, news of their engagement spread quickly among friends, family, and even colleagues at Skyward Airlines. Everyone celebrated the union of two people who embodied the values of love, compassion, and perseverance. For Amara and Elijah, however, the real joy came from knowing that their journey was only beginning. Together, they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, confident in the strength of their partnership. In the years that followed, Amara and Elijah continued to grow both personally and professionally. Under their leadership, Skyward Airlines expanded its reach, becoming a global symbol of inclusivity and innovation. But more importantly, they built a life rooted in love and purpose, a testament to the idea that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can lead to the most extraordinary outcomes. And as they stood side by side, hand in hand, watching planes take off into the sky, they knew that their story was proof that fate had a way of bringing the right people together at exactly the right time.